what happened to being a traditional wife now? Now we got a girl boss running Turning Point. Am I the only one that sees the contradiction here? It's what Charlie would have wanted. Now a 30-some-year-old woman is going to be running the organization. That's not very biblical. That's not very traditional. And I think it's very cynical the way that she's being pushed in.
I feel like in a way, this would be one of the few times actually where you could view it as traditional. Now, maybe you could argue she needs to spend more time, I guess, with the children or whatever. But I don't know how religious people feel about remarrying when you have a young death. I don't know. Maybe, I guess I've never talked to religious people about that. I'm not sure. Would they expect somebody to stay single for the rest of their lives? I'm not actually sure.
Into the center. And I said it last night. The reason they're doing that is because it's like atrocity propaganda. Who can ever criticize a grieving widow?
True.
She's a victim, you know? She's a victim of a horrible tragedy, and so that makes her beyond criticism, so they're pushing her in the middle of this, and I see people saying she should run for president now.
Yes, please.
And I think that's very sneaky. I think that's very sneaky, and I think it's kind of evil, actually. The way that they seem to be leveraging the tragedy to create this political breakout moment. That's what that feels like to me. This feels like it was either scripted, it's in the script, or they're taking advantage of the situation and they're making like a calculated political breakout moment for her and saying she's going to run for office or she's going to now lead Turning Point. And you can't say boo about it because she's the victim of a horrible tragedy. Well, you know, I'm not like other people. This is...
I don't know if, like, again, and maybe some people disagree with me. I don't know, but, like, I don't think you can build huge things off of, like, martyrdom or tragedy or bullshit like that. Like, you can get, like, this temporary boost. But if she was somebody who was so prone to making good or captivating content or leading in this manner, I think she probably would have already been utilized in that manner. And she hasn't been, so... I don't know. I don't have high hopes for this going very far for them. Or I guess in a roundabout way, I would have high hopes because I hope that the movement fails. But
politics. I said it last night. Nobody would have anything to say about it if you were grieving with your 2 fatherless children at home, but you thrust yourself into the center of it after 3 days. That's a whole different story.
True.
And I don't like sneaky shit like that. I don't like when people take advantage of emotions. I don't like when political people take advantage of sentiment. I think it's very cynical. I think it's very calculated. I think it's deviant.
I mean, everybody does that. Fwentes will do it too when it comes to insultdom or immigrants or whatever else. But I mean, I guess he'll call it out when it's against his particular political persuasion.
And I think they know what they're doing there. And they know you can't touch that because it's atrocity. Whenever there's an atrocity, we have to turn our brains off and pretend we're not thinking what we're thinking. And I don't like that. I think that's sneaky. So again, she wanted to go and be with her family that must be shaken and destroyed with the loss of its patriarch. That would be one thing. Why don't you take care of your kids? I know it's not my position to say that, but why don't you go and be with your kids now? Your kids don't have a father. The family's reeling. She wanted to give a speech, then the memorial. Now she's hosting the show. She's going on different. She's going on Alex Clark, talking about unreleased content. The show goes on. Why don't she... Didn't Charlie have 1 million lieutenants that can do this? Aren't there 1 million people that could line up to succeed him? Look at that Brylan Hollyhand. The way that guy is salivating at the opportunity, it's just gross. You see this guy? And there's 100 of them. There's 100, wannabe college Republican presidents. It is their dream to be the next Charlie Kirk. They are lining up to pick up the bloodstained microphone and take his place. Aren't there 2,000 people that could do that? Take care of your kids. Now we're going to get a girl boss, an untouchable girl boss that nobody can say anything about. I'll be the asshole and say it. Everyone's thinking that on some level. And the only people, and I'm going to say this is the last thing and then we'll move on and get into the news. The only people that don't like to hear this, hate to say it this way, but it's suckers. It's women who are very emotional. women who are very empathetic and compassionate, and God bless women for that. I know a lot of women saw that speech and they were crying and they were emotional, and so women are buying this, and a lot of like sucker men.
I could be wrong, and there's no way for me to gauge this or go get a feel in it, but I actually feel like it would be just the opposite. I feel like women would be the one who would pick up the most on how inauthentic this is, because I feel like they'd be the first ones to put themselves in that position of like, father of my 2 children just got assassinated. Could I imagine myself giving speeches and shit on stage? I feel like, and all the people that came out, or it seems like most of the people that came out publicly to make speeches in support were all men, right? Like all the Turning Point USA people that were on the initial podcast that Vance did, I think they were all men. I think it might have been every single person on that first podcast that JD Vance hosted in the, was he in the Capitol or the White House or whatever? Might have been, literally every single guest might have been a man. But that's not good for the narrative, I guess.
I saw a lot of people. That's really insensitive. How could you say that? Hey, man, grow up. This is politics.
Oh, Caroline Levitt was on, yeah.
Bro out of breath from doing shrugs. LMAO. Well, how about you fucking face me in a fucking cage match? Huh? Yeah, my cardio is so bad. Well, why don't you fight me in a cage? We'll see how bad my fucking cardio really is, dipshit. I do 40 minutes of fucking cardio every day. Yeah, guess what? Unlike you, I fucking lift heavy and train hard, and yes, you have to breathe heavy, because when you're lifting heavy fucking weights with high intensity, that requires fucking oxygen. If you're a tiny little fuck who lifts shitty-ass little baby weights, yeah, you might not have to breathe very hard. Fucking idiot.
What's this? Hold on. Gary's Economics. How to convince your friends to back wealth taxes. God, I hate
Alright,
this
so
guy.
now I'm going to address some of the main pushbacks against the idea that we need to tax the very rich, that we need to tax wealth, not work. And I'm just going to go through them one after another. Most of these we've already covered before on the channel, but it's nice to have them all in one place, I think. And we keep being asked these same questions again and again. The most common pushback we get by a million miles is, you can't tax them. If you tax them, they'll leave. And what this misunderstands is, and this is a very, very common criticism what I do, is a kind of sometimes intentional, sometimes accidental misunderstanding of, I am trying to tax people who own an enormous amount of wealth. I'm not trying to tax high-earning individuals. That's why we chose to use the slogan, tax wealth, not work. We live in a tax system which already taxes high-earning individuals very highly. It does not tax extremely wealthy families or individuals very highly at all. So working people are going to be paying 50, 60%, maybe more if you include everything, whereas billionaires are often paying 0%. This is an absurd tax system. So we're not trying to tax, first things to make it very clear, we're not trying to tax working people. In fact, we want to reduce tax on working people. We're trying to tax the billionaires, the super, super rich. And this is relevant to the idea of if you tax them, they'll leave. Because if you try and tax a working person, like a doctor or a lawyer or a YouTuber, then that person can very often move to Dubai or move to Singapore, and they can do their job in that other country. They can pay tax in that other country, which might be at a lower rate. They can avoid the tax. If we're talking about taxing...
Okay. No. Income taxes are not easily avoidable from country to country. I feel like the idea of uprooting your entire fucking life and just moving to another country is actually quite burdensome for most people, but okay. All right.
Billionaires, they don't make their money from their work. They get their money from owning assets. And assets means property, assets means land, assets means natural resources, assets means government debt, it means your mortgage, it means businesses that sell to the West. These guys, they own largely property and debt. I think one way to think about it is, if I have an asset, I get a passive income. Where does that income come from? So if I own British businesses, it comes from British consumers. If I own British debt, it comes from British mortgagees. People have mortgages. If I own British government debt, it comes from the British taxpayer. If I own British property, it comes from British renters. And the same is true all over the West. So if I own a ton of British assets and I try to move to Dubai, I'm still taking an enormous amount of cash flow from British people when they pay that passive income. So wealth holders can be taxed even if they leave. There's this absurd idea. Oh my God. Some people even start to mention, I think I'll do a brief segue here because
That's not a wealth tax. That's just a capital gains tax. Does he know the difference? Or that's just a tax on, I I guess like rents, if you like rental income or whatever, but he's not talking about a wealth tax right now.
It's so ridiculous. Some people start to mention this idea of a Laffer curve about taxing wealth, and the idea of a Laffer curve is if you tax people so much, they would eventually like avoid the tax. So if you really,
that's it. That's the whole thing. Okay. I don't know what he's talking about here. That had nothing to do with a wealth tax. Sounds like what he's in favor of might be a higher capital gains tax, or might be a higher tax on incomes that aren't just related to doing like work, I guess, like rental incomes or whatever. I'm sure there are other types of incomes associated with this, but
increase tax on work, people will stop working or people will leave the country. But if you first of all, this Laffer curve goes up and down, so it's supposed to hit a top at like 50%. We're trying to raise tax on wealth from 0% to 2%, which is definitely not a section which is downward sloping in this curve. How do you avoid a wealth tax? We're taxing ownership. We're taxing hoarded wealth. The way that you avoid a tax on hoarded wealth is you stop hoarding wealth, which is exactly what we want. We want the rich people to stop hoarding wealth so that you can get your fucking wealth back. That's what we want. That is what we want. So we are not trying to tax working people. We are trying to cut tax on working people. We want to attract productive people, productive businesses to the country. We want to stop taxing ordinary working people like you. We want to stop taxing ordinary working people like your kids. We want to tax the super rich. Let's talk about what happens if you don't tax the super rich. If you don't tax the super rich, their wealth grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And other people in society, like the middle class, like the government, see their wealth shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. Eventually, the government runs out of wealth and has a choice between shutting the welfare state down, taxing the rich, or taxing the middle class. If you do not tax the rich, you will end up taxing the middle class. We here on this channel are the people trying to protect the middle class. If you do not tax the rich, then the middle class will be next. And you are seeing this happen. We're going to see this happen in the UK in the budget this autumn. You are going to see, because of the government's unwillingness to tax the super rich, that the middle class get taxed. You are seeing this at the moment with Donald Trump in the US. He is cutting tax on billionaires and he is moving towards consumption taxes, which is a tax on the middle class. Listen, the billionaires are going to try to tell you that when I say tax the billionaires, I mean tax you. At the same time, the billionaires are actively raising your taxes.
Actively.
If you want to protect your kids and your wealth and your tax rates, you need to protect yourselves from the people who are going to take your wealth, which is the billionaires. Now, this is related to the next point, which I'll just cover quickly, which...
Don't you fucking skip this test. You know you hate wealth, but Gary knows his shit. This guy is a fucking retard. What are you talking about? He makes a living betting on the middle class losing. No, he doesn't. And no, he never did. This guy traded like at the short interest desk or whatever at some company. It was like a mid-tier trader for 2 years and then left to make way more money doing a YouTube channel. That's what this guy does. That's where he makes all of his money from.
Is taxing rich people is really, really hard, so we shouldn't do it. I agree, taxing rich people is super, super hard. I think the main reason taxing rich people is super hard is because they have so much power and influence over the media and over politicians. But I think we have a chance of doing it, and I think if we don't do it, then our economy will collapse. So I think it's worth doing it to avoid our country collapsing. Listen, our grandparents and our great-grandparents lived in desperate poverty, and they fought hard to make things better, and they did make things better. If you don't fight hard to protect the working classes, the middle classes, then you lose the middle class and you lose your wealth. Just because something is difficult, that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. A country which refuses to do difficult but essential things collapses. Listen, curing cancer is difficult, but if you had cancer...
I don't get what's wrong with what he's saying. Well, so when people talk about a wealth tax is generally something. It's generally a tax that's assessed at the wealth that you own, against the wealth that you own. So if I own a couple of houses, if I own a business, shares in a business, if I own some, whatever, just the aggregate, my net worth, you're assessing in some way some kind of tax against that. There are a few criticisms of wealth taxes. One can be that it's hard to assess somebody's net worth. So for instance, let's say that you wanted to do a wealth tax and you wanted to apply it to me. Well, I would imagine, I think probably one of the wealthiest assets that I would own technically maybe would be my business. But like, how are you going to assess the wealth of a business that doesn't buy or sell shares and it's not publicly listed on any market or index anyway, right? Like, what is Destiny.gg LLC worth? I don't know, that'd be a hard thing to value, you know? That's one issue. Another issue is, like, he's kind of brought up his capital flight. If there is the worry that there's going to be a higher tax in one area than there is in another, then capital tends to leave that area and it'll go to another area where the rate of return, there's a name for this. I always fucking forget it. It's the big fucking acronym and I always forget it. It's the return before, is it depreciation taxes, all that bullshit. There's a fucking big ass thing. All my finance losers in here know it. But like they might move to a different place. Oh, is it EBITDA? Earnings before, is it interest, depreciation, taxes, and what's A? Maybe I don't actually know if that would apply here or not then. Basically just like if you know there's gonna be a wealth tax in some area, you would just move your wealth out or you just wouldn't accrue wealth there anyway. Yeah, but when he's talking about like, oh, well, if we tax people more who are making money off of renting property, well, that's not a wealth tax. You would just be taxing their income more on the rental income that they get. So that'd be a form of income tax. Or if he's talking about we need to tax people more on the appreciation of their assets or whatever when they do something like selling government debt or whatever, when the government debt appreciates or whatever, that's just a capital gains tax. So nothing that he's talking about is hard to do. Every country has forms of capital gains taxes and forms of income taxes. That's not a wealth tax at all. He didn't do anything to describe a wealth tax at all. And he didn't describe any of the problems with wealth taxes at all. One of the things to deal with capital flight, I think, that is an interesting idea. I say this, but I actually don't know if this applies to individuals. It might just be a business thing. But the idea of like global minimum taxes, or that there are global, like you need some kind of enforcement among all of your big countries for some type of like global minimum tax, so that capital can't just flee from one country to another to treat it as a tax haven. Environments like that would make it easier for individual nations to collect tax from people, and so that one nation couldn't kind of like capitalize on another country trying to tax people in it. But those are very hard to do because you need obviously international cooperation and everything. I think they're probably worth investing time and energy into. But what he just said here had literally nothing to do with the wealth tax. Whatever. Or
would you want to just try and let it take control? It's worth doing. I'm going to keep fighting, so you should fight too. Okay, so the next argument against this, which is common, is that it's not fair. It's not fair to tax rich people. Rich people work so hard. They deserve all of the money that they get. Okay, I just want to make it clear, I'm not trying to tax working people. I work very hard. I pay 50-60%. At the same time, the Duke of Westminster inherited £10 billion and paid nothing. I don't think that's very fair. We always campaign on tax wealth, not work. Unless you are a billionaire, a super wealthy person, we are trying to cut your taxes. Listen, if you want to talk about fairness, if we do not do anything about this system, then very, very quickly, the billionaires will own everything and you will own nothing. And we will move into a system where all wealth is inherited and it is impossible for ordinary people to own wealth. Does that sound fair to you? But to be honest, once again, I think this is a good general piece of advice when you're talking about persuading people. Personally, I don't like to focus on fairness. I like to focus on real outcomes, which is if you don't deal with this aggressive growth in wealth of the very, very rich, then what that means is there will be no wealth holdings anywhere else. So whether you want fairness or whether you want unfairness, you have a choice. Do you want untaxed billionaires or do you want your grandkids to own property? You cannot have both. You cannot have everything being owned by a minority.
Decoding the Gurus always have fun ripping into Gary. Yeah, but their audience hates it because their audience leans pretty far left, I think. Yeah, the problem is that like there are answers to these questions. They're just like very unsexy and you can't make a whole YouTube channel out of it. Like I've said this for the United States, it's probably true for other countries. Like you should just bump your upper tax brackets up a few points. Or you could even create like higher tax brackets if you wanted to. Create like one or two higher ones that are bumped up a few points. Like just doing that is going to raise so much more money for the government. Like create a higher tax bracket, have it be 2 to 4 points higher than the current highest tax bracket, or just bump all your tax brackets, your top 2 or 3 in the US, like up like 1 to 3 points, and then boom, you're making hundreds of billions more dollars rather than trying to implement an incredibly unwieldy, difficult to enforce, bad track record, historically, internationally wealth tax. Wealth taxes just suck. They're just so hard to make work and applied to the correct people and to raise any amount of money off of them and then to enforce them. They're just shit. People that are obsessed with wealth taxes, I think, are people who just view taxation as like a punishment for people, rather than trying to actually raise money for the state, because I think that billionaires or whatever should be punished. But like all this wealth tax obsession and all this like stealing money from poor people is not going to account for somebody like Bezos or Elon Musk if the massive amount of wealth that they have is all tied to a huge business that they own. It's not like they're going out and buying out like 500 houses and stealing property from poor people. They just have a lot of net worth tied up in huge shares of a now multinational, multi-billion dollar company,
And things being owned by the majority. You have to choose. Either you tax the billionaires.
Yes, never happens though. Easier said than done. Actually, I think it's really easy to do. That's the one thing I disagree with. I think it's a really easy proposition. The problem is nobody talks about it because it's not sexy and it's not fun and cool. And then the right is never going to talk about it in the United States because the right are fucking crazy. The left always wants to fixate on these like very esoteric, like retarded forms of taxation, like wealth taxes or like death taxes. Like you're not raising a lot. Like there's not that many wealthy people dying that you're going to be making, hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars for the government off of like dead, rich people. It's just not happening. But it's like, hey, why don't we just bump all the tax brackets up a few points? We'll make so much more money. Fund your IRS more. Go after all the money is out there. Like that's such an easy way. It's easy to do. It's simple. We already have all the mechanisms in place for it. But this is Destiny's worst talking point. Taxation isn't a punishment. It's a way of funding the government. And some people can afford to contribute many magnitudes of order more than others. I like how you say this is my worst talking point, and then you literally just steal all of my talking points about taxes. You're very intelligent. That's my favorite troll in chat, by the way. That's the 10 out of 10. My favorite troll is when somebody comes in and they say like, Destiny is so stupid on this. And then you just repeat like exactly my position on a thing. Like Destiny's so dumb on this. Like we should just do, and then quote me verbatim. I love that. That's my favorite troll. Okay. That's my favorite troll.